had heart disease. So obviously this must have been a heart attack. There's no need to do an autopsy. So they put his cause of death as heart attack, and then they cremated him and then called his wife and let her know that he had died. Like, they
Wow.
cremated him so fast.
Dude, what?
I know.
The CIA's fucked up, man.
I know. But we don't know who. Like, it could have been the Soviets too, because I think it
Oh,
wasn't a US base that was like that they discovered. It was like someone else's. So it could have been someone else, maybe. But after his death, reports came out that he may have been helping his church blackmail the CIA. Like, he would go home every day and tell his church everything he did, and then the church would blackmail the CIA. And it's like, yeah, I don't think so.
what is this church?
I know, exactly. Like, right. That's not really like a credible story to me. And anyone who knew him said that they didn't think that he did that. And
Yeah.
they've had like current remote viewers try to find where he is, and a lot of them think that his death may have been faked and that he is like still doing it, but he was such a like important asset and had seen stuff, so they were like, okay, we have to put you in hiding. And now
Yeah.
he's just their little psychic slave or something. I don't know.
I mean, maybe like just a spy, right? Like you just can't ever say who you actually are and you're just always a secret agent or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see how it could be Russians because how like he's talking to CIA about what he sees, right? So who would have leaked that to?
Oh, I mean, their names did get
Oh.
leaked. Like, their names were on lists of like Russian, like KGB targets.
Oh,
Like,
well.
they were kind of in danger
Yeah.
a little bit.
So maybe it's like witness protection.
Yeah, I maybe it could be.
Hmm. That's really weird.
And our next person is Ingo Swann, who was like one of the first psychics that was involved with this and was like super extremely talented. In 1972, I think he was okay. Pat Price is like everyone said he was the most talented person in the group, and that's why the CIA worked with him. But Ingo was the first and also extremely talented. And in 1972, in the newsletter of the American Society for Psychic Research, which psychical research, which sounds like a big old hoax to me. Their director of research, Carlos Osis, described his personal controlled out of body experiment with Swan. The targets that Swan was to attempt to describe and illustrate were on a shelf 2 feet from the ceiling and several feet above his head. He does not describe the height of the ceiling, but Swan says that the ceiling was probably like 14 feet tall. So he couldn't see what he was describing, but the room was illuminated by two kitchen style overhead light fixtures. Swan sat alone in the chamber with wires from electrodes fastened to his head running through the wall behind him. Swan sat just beneath the target tray. He was given a clipboard to use for sketching. Any movement while drawing did not result in artifacts in the brain readout, but in Swan's book, To Kiss the Earth Goodbye, there was a photograph of the objects on the shelf. Swan wrote that he was aware of most of the objects on the shelf above his head, but did not know it held four numbers on a side that would not have been visible if a reflecting surface had been angled. Like, so they put him in a room with stuff above his head and asked him to describe what was above his head, and like he could. They have never been able to explain how he could have done that.
Yeah. Where did they find these people?
I think just by word of mouth,
Oh.
maybe? Like, I don't know. I think the CIA had people everywhere
Oh.
and they were keeping an eye on them. I don't know what Ingo was doing before. Probably performing like psychic shows. You know what I mean? These people were like entertainers.
Oh, okay, yeah. So they just got recruited basically or whatever they found.
Right.
Hmm.
So after Swan joined the SRI research, Russell Targ, and Hal Puthoff, who was the other researcher in charge of this, like, they've written about their early work. They could give him coordinates and he could describe what was there. And they thought, maybe he does know the geographical features of the Earth and
Oh.
latitude and longitude. Because Swan is the one who suggests these remote viewing tests. So he's in control.
Oh.
That was like their early research, was him saying, well, I can do this. You give me coordinates, I'll tell you what's there. But even that seems, you know what I mean? Like that would be
Yeah.
hard.
Right, especially then. Like, I know now with like GeoGuessr and stuff, there is like this guy that I see on TikTok sometimes that he literally like places himself somewhere and he doesn't look around. Like he's just where the camera is focused and he can say exactly like where that is. Just because he's looked at the geo maps so many times. But back then, we don't have those maps.
Right, they didn't have like the internet.
Right. So how would he know every spot on the earth?
I don't
Like
know.
now you could, but like definitely not then. Unless you literally travel. I mean, you can't travel the whole world.
Right. And then they thought maybe that they were like accident, like he was like cold reading them. Like maybe
Oh.
since the subjects knew what was there, that he was able to like cold read them. But they started doing other experiments with Swan, and they were like basically tighten the controls to eliminate the possibility of error. Swan was given the latitude and longitude of 10 targets, and they would do 10 runs. So 100, like 10 people in 10 different locations, 10 times, and only the evaluations of the 10th run were like disclosed as their research, which I assume kind of gets rid of like some variation. I don't know. And then they ignored the top 9. On the 10th run, Swan had 7 hits, 2 neutrals, and 1 miss, which is pretty good to guess where someone
Yeah,
is.
right. Because if you were just randomly guessing, you would not get that much.
Right, and he didn't know which ones they were counting and which ones they weren't.
Right. Hmm.
And obviously, the researchers were like, something is happening, but we don't know what.
Yeah, I like that quote. I mean, it's fair.
Yeah,
Obviously, that there has to be something going on, but yeah, they don't know. And I
right.
mean, no one knows really,
And
but
like after looking at all the data, they basically said that his remote viewing was correct 95% of the time, and his students' remote viewing was 85% correct 85% of the time. So like sometimes they'll get most of it but not everything, or like
yeah.
they'll say something that isn't there but they'll get 85% of it 85% of the time, which that seems extremely.
Yeah, that seems pretty good.
85%? That's better than just guessing. I
Right.
think a lot better than just guessing.
I feel like just guessing you'd get like 30%. Like you wouldn't even get half.
Yeah. And then for like a while they give a random researcher a location in a sealed envelope. Like they'd have like 30 sealed envelopes with locations that Swan should not have known any of them at all. Like he didn't know any of the locations, but in case he did, it was like 30 envelopes. They would pick a numbered envelope, they'd leave, they'd open the envelope, they'd see what the location was, and then they'd go to the location. And when they were there, they'd have Swan try to figure out like where the person was. So one time they gave him the Palo Alto City Hall, and what he described was an enclosed area, maybe a quadrangle or a quad, and got the feeling that there might be a fountain, but he couldn't hear any water running. And he drew like it was like a circle at this. Okay, like imagine like a cross with a circle in the middle and then the points don't meet. Like lines coming perpendicular out of a circle, and he thought that they were like a crosswalk and sidewalks, but the ground there is paved like that. And I've included a picture of the ground. Like you can see that's what it looked like. At the time, the fountain was turned off, but it did exist. And then there's this like ceiling pavilion type thing it's a square that goes around the whole block that it's on, like a covered walkway, I
Oh,
guess, but it's open. So he like pretty spot on got it.
right. Yeah, that's pretty crazy that he could do that.
Yeah. And like, okay, maybe he guessed, but
But that's a lot of specific things in there that are all
right.
correct.
And it's just weird. And then he also proposed in 1973 that he do a remote viewing session of Jupiter, which had never been seen before. Like at that point we hadn't taken pictures of it up close like we have now. So he was sat in silence for 30 minutes, and it took him about 3.5 minutes to see Jupiter. He made several reports of physical features of Jupiter, such as its atmosphere and the surface of its core. He also
Hmm.
claimed to see a band of crystals in the atmosphere, which he called like clouds and possibly like the rings of Saturn. The Voyager probe later confirmed that the existence of Jupiter rings, and they were not like they had never been confirmed before.
Hmm.
And like some other stuff that he had seen was later, like he described ammonia ice crystals in the atmosphere, and he also described, well, he didn't say, he said there were crystals in the atmosphere and rings. So we have rings. NASA's Galileo spacecraft confirmed ice crystals, ammonia ice crystals in Jupiter by the red spot. Like he got a lot of it right for something that like he could not have known.
Yeah, you can't know that at all, ever. But he got it.
No. Like if scientists don't know that, he knew that.
Yeah, I believe it. I think this is really
Yeah. And another story is so there was they were doing research, and there's like a guy in the hallway and they're like, give us a set of coordinates. So this guy's like, okay, I know these coordinates, let's do this. And he draws this whole like military base with like he's like there's 4 stories underground, there's a tower, a circular driveway. And the guy's like, no, it was my cabin. And so the guy doing the research, I think his name was Kit Green, called Russell Targ and was like, and they used the same coordinates for him and Pat Price. He called Russell Targ and he's like, he got it wrong. He like described this whole military base and it was just the guy's cabin. And Russell Targ goes, the other guy described the same thing, the same military base.
Oh, really?
So they're like, hold on, what is happening? Like they're like, what are the odds that these two people separately, they don't like they weren't together, came up with the same thing. So
Right.
they drive out to this cabin, which is in the like, do you know the zone of like radio silence, like the quiet zone? There's like a mandated quiet zone where there's no, okay, well, in I want to say it's in like West Virginia or somewhere over by Virginia or West Virginia. There's like a zone in the US that has like no radio signals. Like it's mandated, no, like they I feel like they can't even have electricity. Like they're
Oh, wow.
maybe not electricity, but they can't have any like TV, nothing. Like it's no, like a lot of people who have think they have like EMF sensitivity move there because it's like there are no EMFs, but they like this is where this cabin is, so they drive out there and he's like, "Yep, okay, here's the cabin." But like just down the road, they find like a base. Like literally right there. And once they like write the report and like report it to the military, that like the base that is called Sugar Grove, which was a top secret NSA site where they were doing like super like listening stuff for on the Russians, Like they once they found out that it existed and wrote the report, like started talking about it, like the military was like, "How did you find out about this? Why is the CIA looking into the NSA